So we've been talking a little bit about margins. I think you had a post that I think you said margin before mission.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to have enough profit to be a going concern. And I think this is this was kind of a not-for-profit that I was talking about, but it's also true. I see it a lot, particularly in my kind of area of the neighborhood with employment and civil rights, where you're in this to do, and I think all lawyers go into it to do good, but I think some of them are more, some areas are not as predisposed to being like, okay, the whole purpose of me doing this is tilting at windmills and fighting the good fight. And so for people that are coming in at that kind of viewpoint, it's kind of a mind shift to be like, okay, you got to look at the back end of this business. Like, this is a money-making endeavor, and it has to make money for you to be able to do all this good stuff that you want to do. And the margins have to be big enough that, you can help more people and do more things. If you're squeaking by at 3 to 5% margins, like, that's your own life sport as a business.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to interview founding attorneys and law firm leaders and learn from their journeys. And this is a special episode because this is the first two-time guest I've had on the show. It's the first returning guest, so happy to do that. So today we got Tom Spiggle. If you want to go listen to the first episode, it's way back when, episode 22, probably over a year and a half ago. But the reason why I wanted to get Tom back is because I follow him on LinkedIn, and if you're not, you need to go follow him. But he's been dropping some just fire posts over the last, 8 to 12 weeks. They've been really speaking to me and sort of where I am and what I've been going through. So I wanted to get him on and sort of talk about some of those topics and have him coach me and everybody out there, talk about some of the journey. But to give it some context, well, first of all, Tom, thanks for coming on and to sort of set this up. Why don't you tell us, introduce yourself, but tell us, when you founded your firm and then sort of what it looks like now and sort of the journey you've been on, and then we'll dive into some of these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me say, Jonathan, I'm thrilled to be back on such a great podcast. Your guests are just fantastic. Every time I see you post new, and I'm like, oh man, I love that person. I want to hear what they got to say. So you're providing a real service for those of us who are trying to grow law firms. Yeah, so I started my firm in 2009. I had graduated law school in 2001 and worked at some private firms, had clerked for a judge, had worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., which is the last real job I had before I hung a shingle. And so when I started in 2009, it was just me. And I had a laptop with a cracked screen and a bunch of hope and unreasonable belief in how this was going to go. That's what I think what got me off the dime. So when I started, it was just me. I'd end up renting a small office, sort of backed into, I didn't have any really grand plans to scale the firm. I was just going to go out and business was just going to pour in and life was going to be good. And that's what I was going to do. And I sort of backed into hiring attorneys because, like I said, I started in 2009, which was the economy was just in a tailspin. It's really an interesting time to open a firm. And I had a trial that was going to, be going forward in federal court in Eastern District of Virginia. And I needed help. I had co-counsel, but I needed help. And so I was looking for law clerks, and I posted an ad and just got deluged with people, bar attorneys who were looking for work. And I ended up hiring 2, I think, and learned what every firm has learned for the past 1,000 years, that if I could pay them X amount and build them out at a higher rate, well, then that, could work out well for me. So that's really how I started to grow at the firm. And it wasn't until, and of course, you reach a certain level, you reach certain, problems. I know you're familiar with the book, The E-Myth, where he talks about the classic entrepreneurial journey where, right, the pie maker comes out really good at making pies. You're making pies, people buying the pies, too many people buying the pies. You hire somebody to make the pies. They don't make the pies as good as you do. that was kind of the learning process that I went through. And I guess it was around 2013, I hired Lee Rosen, who was one of the early guys out there writing about law firm management. And just like you were describing some of my posts, like he was writing posts that he was blogging. This is back in blogging was a big thing. And I was like, how did he get in my head? How did he know? Like, how did he know that I was, and I remember one distinctly where I had a client, it was knockdown drag out fight in federal court. And she at one point just came convinced that I was working with the other side. I mean, and he posted about that. And I'm like, I thought I was the only person in the world that this had ever happened to. So I ended up hiring him as a coach. And that really, he started just the idea that you could scale a firm, how to treat it as a business. And that really started me on a trajectory. And from there, I've spent, I don't know, I shudder to think and how much money I've spent on coaching. So I've grown over the years and kind of fits and starts. I hit $1 million in revenue in probably 2017, 2018, and then have grown pretty steadily since then, hitting occasional, plateaus every now and then. We'll probably close out at over 5 million this year. We've got around just under 40 people total. I think we have 7 attorneys. So yeah, that's been sort of the trajectory.
Well, the other thing you've got obviously attorneys and staff and all that, but you've got some, I'll call it C-suite type people too, or at least one that I've met. And you've posted a little bit about that. So I do want to dive into that as well, because as if you look at sort of the evolution of a firm, you've talked about some of it, but at some point, you start to hire these sort of C or higher level executive types that may or may not be lawyers. I think probably better if they're not, but we can get into that as well. And so you're at least to that level. And maybe we'll just start there. What was that like? What made you go out to hire this non-lawyer C-suite type person?
Yeah. And as with most of my good ideas, somebody gave it to me along the way. And really, so I joined How to Manage a Small Law Firm, was in that program for a number of years. And that's where I really got the idea of kind of building out a C-suite. And I hired Brian, who is now my CEO. I hired him as a COO. And I think at that time, I had an office manager at that time. I had a sales manager. I think we had like a marketing assistant, but that was kind of the extent of the management team. And the advice I got was trying to be exactly right. They said, hey, once you get to about $1.5 million in revenue, the firm's going to you're going to not be able to keep your arms around it. Up to that point, you're going to be able to keep your fingers in all the pies and, kind of be able to shepherd the growth forward, but it's going to start to get out from under you. And that's about exactly what happened. So we're approaching around $1.5 million. And again, I'll have to give credit to How to Manage. I was trying to do it on the cheap. I was looking for somebody inside. I was going to, hire a paralegal, wanted to promote one of our paralegals. And they were just like, no, do not, you need to hire somebody who's going to come out of the box, who knows what they're doing, and that you don't have to train them up. And they got a strong assist from my wife, who had seen the underbelly of the law firm's growth for years and was very painfully aware of my strengths and my many weaknesses, one of which was the financial aspect and just financial controls. And she was just like, you've got to hire somebody who knows what they're doing. That ended up being Brian. And so I hired, what's the name of the association? The Association of Legal Professionals, I think is the name of the group. And so we posted there. And I kind of caught Brian on the rebound. He had been in big firms in DC for a number of years, had gotten burnt out on kind of the big firm life and had some things going on in his personal life and just kind of wanted to reboot. And so I hired him as my COO. And, it was, as with a lot of things, it was some taking action and it was some just serendipity, that he was good, that we worked together well. As I think I posted about, like I think when you're hiring at that level, it's not like you're going to hire a COO or somebody at that level and they're all going to be good at all the things, right? They should know about all the things, but it's like they're going to be stronger in one area. Like you hire somebody who's like really good in sales and they know marketing and they know operations, but they're really good in sales. And you hire somebody that's really good with the financial aspect, and they were a little bit of sales, so you got to pick, that's got to kind of fit together. And with Brian, it really did, because his strength was the financial controls and the financial operations. I mean, he's come to learn the rest of it, but that's really what I needed, because, we were growing. We were breaking revenue, every month, bringing in more revenue, but then we were breaking spending records more than the revenue. And as it turns out, the simple math, that doesn't work out for very long. And so he got in there, and I tell you, it was, I can't remember if I mentioned it. We joke about it now, but my now legal administrator, who was a long-term paralegal, she would joke with our other paralegal that we were the hot mess express. Like, that's right. We were just boom, breaking, everything was, growing, breaking. And so when he started, it was just like, oh man. I mean, I remember coming to him, and it's one of those things, like, it's right. Like, it all happens in threes or tens. Like, we had a real problem with one of our attorneys. I had a sales team, but as I, now know, and as he helped me fix the comp structure, was just jacked. It didn't work well. Just a bunch of problems coming in. And I remember walking into his office, and I'm like, A, it's not really this bad all the time. And B, give me 90 days. Don't quit for 90 days. And we joke about this now. Like, don't give me 90 days before you leave. And fortunately, he didn't. But that's really what he immediately got in there. And he was like, you got to plug this hole. You got to plug that hole. And we did. And we've been because I tend to be all gas, and Brian's not all brake, but he's enough brake that it acts as a counterbalance to me. And so that's been really good.
So yeah, there's so much in there I want to ask it. So I'm going to throw all this out there, and we'll just start picking. So, and I'm sort of experiencing this right now, and people call it the messy middle or the swamp, or there's all these names for it, where you're growing fast, but you're not quite there yet. So you can see it, but it is chaotic, as you just described, and you got to hire people to plug the holes, but you don't necessarily have the cash yet that you really need to invest. And so you're in this sort of catch-22 kind of situation. So you got this messy middle that you have to go through, where your expenses are probably higher than they need to be higher, because you're not quite there at the revenue level yet, but it's sort of you just got to do it. And so, I'm sort of going through that now a little bit. And then the other piece is, you're a go kind of guy. You see the vision. You're like, I'm going there, and I know how to get there, but it's going to take money and energy and all this to get there that you don't maybe you don't have it yet. So
yeah, sure.
So take me through how you made it through all that. And I guess Brian helped you, or whatever.
Yeah, Brian sort of came in at the crest of that wave, and helped, obviously helped continue it. But yeah, I think some of it there is a little bit of believing in the dream, right? And I'm no accountant, you've got to, right? There's one of my friends who ended her entrepreneurial objective. She said, I believe in gravity and the need to pay my mortgage. Right? So this is all, real stuff, but you have to believe in the dream. And I think there just are times when you got to break out the Amex. I think probably if I had to do it again, I would have a little bit more of a plan, like just a little bit more like, okay, like I'm kind of I'm purposely getting out over my ski tips, but I know it's only going to be for a limited amount of time, and this is when I'm going to dial it back. But there was definitely a time when, I was spending, which turned out to be a good decision, but I was spending money to get in rooms with people who could help me. Right. Who are just, a bunch of steps before me. And some of that just ended up being, I don't know that it's a waste, but some of it hit and some of it didn't. I'd like to have some of that money back, but you just don't know. Right. And you've just got to, you've got to get in front of people who will help you, and you got to take a few risks. I think in terms of hiring C-suite level people, or really anybody, and this is, one thing that I got from one of my coaching groups is, don't make the mistake of thinking I've got to be able to pay for this person for a year, right? Like, okay, this person, whatever it is, they're going to, they want a salary of 110. So I need to have 110 in the bank to get me through my first year. No, like, you need to have 90 days worth of that salary, because really after 90 days, they should be, if they're a biller or if they're a producer, they should be making that money and more. And if they're not, they should be doing things. It should be apparent to you by that point that they're helping to move the ball forward, so you're going to make that money back. So I think it's those two things, believing in the dream a little bit, maybe every now and then spending a little bit of stupid money and taking a little bit of a risk, preferably with some kind of plan, right? Even if it doesn't work out exactly like you think it's going to, and hiring people, but not expecting that you've got to hire a little bit before you're ready. And, you don't need to pay for them for a year. You need to pay for them for 90 days. And if it's not working by 90 days, then you need to let them go.
Yeah, the spending stupid money, you had to post on that. And I mean, we've all done it. If you run a firm, you spent stupid money. You just don't know it at the time. It reminds me, there's a scene in the movie Jaws when they're on the boat drinking that night and they're all comparing their scars. I got this one and all that. That's what it feels like to me with other law firm owners. It's like, there's lots of money I spent and I'm like, why the hell did I spend that? It just, it would have been better going to Paris and blowing it out, or whatever. But
it's true. And our John Robbins, who's the one who does How to Manage, he told a story one time, which resonated so much with me. He's like, entrepreneurship, it's sort of like becoming a parent. Like if you're in a room with a bunch of parents, there's a little piece of you that's dead inside. It's just hard. Like you wouldn't give up having your kids, but it's probably is a lot different than you thought it was going to be. And the way you reacted is different than you thought it would. And you would never rewind the tape, but and the same thing with entrepreneurs. They're just a piece of you. You're like, just dead, it's just hard. And you've got to, the death of that. I'm not saying it's not worth it. It's great. But like the death of that initial shiny dream, to your point, leaves a scar.
Yeah. So I want to talk about owner bottlenecks a little bit. I mean, and there's so many and they never go away, at least maybe they do eventually, but I feel like there's always a new one eventually that you bump into. And so just over the years, I'm curious what has been your experience or some of the bottlenecks that, you encountered that you had to say, all right, I got to get out of the way. And then how do you get past that? That's a little bit E-myth, I guess, but how do you get through? What's the mindset shift to be like, okay, I'm stepping aside and handing this over?
Yeah. I mean, I think probably the best advice I got about that was McGinley Rosen early on. And he was talking to me about delegating and I, was just stuck on a couple of issues. And he was like, look, whatever you were delegating down, and in this case, it was legal work, but he's like, don't expect them to be you, right? They're not going to write like you. They're not going to talk to a judge like you. And sometimes they're not going to be as good as you. Sometimes they'll be better in some aspects, but sometimes they're not going to be as good as you. But if you can get to 80%, I mean, of course, we all want good client work. They've got to meet that goal. But if you can get to 80%, like you just need to free yourself up to focus on branding, marketing, sales, the things that really help you kind of leverage the business. Because if you are constantly diving back in to try to get them to 100% of you, you're never going to get past that. And so I think, and that's true that's as an owner, the truth is you probably are good at a lot of it. Maybe not the best, right? We've all got our weaknesses, but if you've grown a business at any size, you've got the ability to deliver the legal services. You've got the ability to do the marketing. You've got the ability to do the sales. I mean, that's not to say that you can't find better people. And that's the idea behind hiring is that you will, but you've got some chops in those areas. And so what happened with attorneys, it happened with sales is another one, right? Because if you're the owner, man, your conversion rate is probably pretty darn good because you believe in the service. You get in there, you're like, you're talking, you're working that prospect, and they're gonna believe in you. When it's all a process of passing kind of that glow off, right? Whether it's the legal services or the sales to other people, and how do you make that work? And so that was probably the biggest thing for me is they're not going to be you, and don't expect them to be you. Yes, you need to have standards, but they're going to do things differently, and that's okay.
So let's talk about the sales or the consults, because I'm bumping up against that now personally. Mm-hmm. Again, because I know it. I've been doing this for 15 plus years. I just, sure. A client may come to me and say they have one problem, and after 5 minutes, I'm like, that's not your problem, it's something else.
Yeah. Right.
And it's hard to train that. So, and it's a fear mindset where I'm like, I'm scared to let that go because I might lose it. So I'm sure you went through that as well. So how did you get to the point where, all right, I'm going to start handing off, especially, perfect example, friend down the street refers you directly. So you need to talk to Tom. You know, like, how do you get out of that way in terms of handing the consult off to somebody else?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and it's gotten easier for me over the years, but I mean, I would say for sales generally, and it depends on your practice area, right? Like, I mean, if you're straight business to consumer like me, or like a bankruptcy or personal injury, it's a little easier, I think, to pass along that trust because, you know, I think I posted about this. Like, if you're white collar criminal defense and you're coming out of the U.S. Attorney's office and the CEO has gotten a subpoena, to appear before the grand jury, handing that off to an associate, it's not impossible, but it's going to be more difficult. Whereas when people come to my firm and they have an employment law issue, yes, in the early days, they definitely wanted to speak to me, but I've got good attorneys that can file a charge with the EEOC just as well as I can. And so I think, getting back to that kind of 80% rule, realizing that you are going to lose some people. That's just a fact, right? Like, as soon as you hand it over, unless you knock it out. I mean, there are some really good salespeople. They're hard to find. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, and I haven't cracked this one, is where do you find people who are good at sales? But anyway, like, you can find people that can sell literally anything, but they're rare. But assuming that they're like, a good, but not knock it out of the top, salesperson or whatever role you use in your firm, that you're going to lose some people, right? They're not going to be as good as you. And you've got to think about, taking your time and increasing the volume of people that are coming to your firm such that, if somebody is selling at converting at 75% of what you did, well, you're not feeling it because you've just upped the volume twice and there are people that are calling your firm. In terms of people like your neighbor down the street, like, that's just a tough one. I mean, I usually will often, and I've been doing this long enough now, people who call me know that I'm not going to be the one handling their case. But normally I would be have the first conversation with them and just be very transparent. Like, I'm not, I'll be overseeing your case. If something really gets hairy, you can reach out to me. But, I've hired somebody really great who's going to handle this and do kind of the warm handoff that way and just be transparent about what's going to happen. But I think you've got to, again, and delegating that piece of your firm down, is hiring people who are good at that role, whether it's sales or whatever you want to call them, and understanding that you're going to have to increase the volume a little bit because they're not going to convert the same way that you do.
Yeah. It's a challenge. I'm there, but I've made the decision. I think that's the first part. You got to make the decision. I'm going to do it, and just the chips are going to fall where they fall. And so.
Well, and I would just add, we don't. Most of the recon client service executives, they're non-attorneys in our firm, but there are attorneys who that's what they do. So you can find somebody who, can, again, because you're describing a situation where you need somebody who knows the business enough to be able to say, oh, you thought this was your problem, but it's actually the holes over there, and so you can find somebody who, and again, a good salesperson is going to produce, I mean, they'll pay for their salary many, many times over. They're hard to find, but they are out there.
Yeah. Well, I'll be looking here soon, but all right. So moving on. So another question, you mentioned it earlier, sort of plateaus. And I think this is another just natural part of a journey of the evolution of a firm or a practice or whatever. I mean, you're going to hit plateaus. And then, so the question is, how do you break through those? And I'm just curious, what plateaus, maybe if you can look back and say, okay, that was one, and then there's another, and this is how I broke through them. Do you recall what any of your plateaus were?
Yes. So, and I think sometimes plateaus are good, right? They give you two things, right? One is, if you're growing at 20+%, I mean, that's a healthy growth rate, and it's stressful. There's just no way you can grow that fast without some things being lit on fire. I mean, that's just, and it's tough on you. It's exciting, right? It's great to have that kind of rocket ship growth. It's tough on you. It's tough on your staff, because when you are growing that fast, things are changing a lot. And some people can live with that and some people can't. And then you're probably hiring and firing, and people are coming and people are going. And if you're, somebody told me that the average law firm growth is like between 2 and 5%. If you've got people that are used to working that, or they've come from the government where it's like it's going along like this, like to jump into a firm where this is rocket ship is going, but this is on fire and this is on fire. And your job is this today, and tomorrow we're switching around to do this. Even the most hardy are after a while going to start to burn out a little bit. So a plateau can be a good thing, and you may want to schedule one every now and then, give everybody a breather. Because another thing too is like growth, as takes cash, and you sometimes want to kind of take your foot off the gas or take the opportunity when you hit them to kind of look at your profit margin, like where some things can you kind of clear out the weeds to get yourself ready to go. So when it's happened for me, and we're kind of hitting one right now, frankly, but where it has happened for me prior to this one was, again, when we changed kind of our sales process. We were having problems with bringing on clients that weren't good fits for us. You kind of get addicted to bringing on new clients, right? Like we have a separate channel. We don't use Slack, but a similar, you use Gchat, the channel's like new client. It's like dopamine hit. And you get addicted to trying to beat those numbers. But then we realized that we were bringing on people who were not a good fit for our firm. And they ended up being unhappy and leaving bad reviews. And so we changed up we really kind of tightened down on our sales process. One of the problems that we had is like people were just, as much as we were, because most of our cases we handle on an hourly or flat fee basis. We're not contingency. And you would tell them, here is our evergreen retainer amount, and this is how our evergreen retainer amount works. And they would hear, this is a flat fee. So if I pay this, I'm done. Well, that's not, like if you've got a complicated case, you've got to re-up. And people weren't getting that. And so we really tightened down on our sales process. Like we just really emphasized that. And the result was that our numbers dropped, right? We weren't bringing it. I tell you, it was talk about a panic, right? Again, because you're focused on that one metric. They dropped by about 20%. And the revenue slowed down. But the upside was about 90 days in, we realized our average case value was going up. So we ended up doing about, staying even on revenue with fewer clients who were better. And we were able to take, from that plateau, then kind of rebuild to the next step. And we did. So, sometimes you'll just hit something like that where, just the natural growth of it, you kind of reach a point where it can't grow anymore, and you kind of look and figure out what the constraint is. And I need to take my own advice on this. It's hard to, but not look at that as like a failure. We all been on social media, like it's all grow, scale. And I'm like that. And we want, a lot of people want to do that, but doing that year after year after year, it's uncomfortable. And frankly, it's probably not healthy for the business.
Yes, I'm with you. I think it's healthy. I was thinking about it the other day, and it's sort of like, it's like the front lines of a war. If you go too far too fast, your supply lines aren't there, and they're not going to be able to support the front line.
Right.
So you got to sort of make sure it's a measured growth, or else you're going to lose.
Right.
You might run out of cash or whatever.
Sure.
And then the other sort of, I guess, analogy is almost like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. It's like you got to just go into that cocoon for a little while and bake. Then you can come out maybe a little stronger. And so that, that's just, I'm going through it. I mean, we had a shit ton of growth over the last sort of 18 months, and it got chaotic, and I'm just like, what the hell's going on? So recently I'm like reading your post. I was like going through it. I was like, yes, you're speaking to me. So now we're like, all right, dial it back. Let's sort of catch our breath, make sure, because all the systems that worked before broke.
Yep.
You got to rebuild all that and make sure it works better. And, so anyway, going through that. So real quick, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, please check out my book, The Law Firm Lifecycle. It's written for law firm owners and those who plan to be owners. In the book, I discuss various issues that come up as a law firm progresses through the stages of its growth, from just before starting a firm to when it comes to an end. The Law Firm Lifecycle is available on Amazon. Now back to the show. Let me ask this. So this is sort of along the line of growth. A lot of firms out there want to cross that $1 million barrier. And it's sort of, I don't know if it's real or not, but it just seems to be this magical number that everybody wants to cross. I'm not sure it's that much different on either side completely, but definitely some things start to change. And I'm curious your experience. So I'll sort of give a hint. about some of the things I've gone through and then get your perspective. So this past year, because I've been focusing on growth and operations and all this stuff, I've been taking a step back from production. And, 6 months, 8 months in, all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, revenue's down a little bit because I'm not producing.
Yeah, sure.
So, revenue drops and then maybe expenses go up at the same time because you're having to hire other people. So maybe take me through some of those risks. I'm sure you went through it. We've touched on it a little bit, but how did you, how and when did you take yourself out of production, and how did that affect sort of the firm?
Yeah. I mean, I think I tried to take myself out of production too soon. Like it was around, again, kind of at $1 million. And, like you said, like that's just it's a psychological thing. Like you've hit, you've hit 7 figures. And I mean, it's an important milestone. There are not that many businesses that ever make it to 7 figures. So, ring the bell, like that's all good stuff, but it's just simple math, right? Like if you're going to take yourself out of production, how big does the pie need to be for you to be able to not produce, right? It's got to be able to carry you. And it's sort of, everybody's different. Like if you're youngish and you can sleep on your parents' couch, and if you're making $1 million a year in revenue in the firm, you're probably not. But if you are, then you can eat mac and cheese for a little bit longer. And, that slice of that pie doesn't need to be as big to feed you. But if you are, as you are, and like I was, like, you're already out there and you've got a mortgage and kids and, all the expectations and expenses that go along with that, that slice of the pie needs to get bigger, right? Because before the pie is a certain size, but like you said, you're part of the production. Well, now if you're going to keep that same kind of revenue coming to you personally, then you've got to grow that pie. And I think just being aware of that. And so, if I had it to do over again, probably not try to pull the plug all at once, try to kind of have a plan again for if I hire this person, what kind of revenue goals do I need to be meeting at what time frame? And of course, these can all change. What time frame do I need to be able to grow that pie big enough to be able to pay myself to be working on the business? And of course, there should be some benefits to it, right? Like if you're freeing up yourself to do the marketing and the sales and the branding, but as you know, that can take a little while to kind of work its way through the system. And I think just being aware of that and doing like, what somebody tell me, like most small businesses, like that it's simple math, right? The problem is if you break it down, it's like simple math, and do the simple math. Like how big does the pie need to be to support you, and maybe not take yourself out of production, right away. You're just kind of slowly, rolling it out, and just being cognizant of that. Like, okay, I've given myself 90 days, 6 months to be able to grow this thing. Am I on track to do that? And if not, do I need to jump back into production? It's a tough call. I mean, nobody does that perfectly smoothly. There are going to be some times where, like you said, like the canary in the coal mine is your bank account. And you look at it and you're like, ooh,
it's
revenue
just
going
going
to be a
down.
little more.
Going down.
And my expenses are going up. This is not the kind of graph that I was hoping for. And that is normal. And just a question of how do you jump in and fix it. I think the wrong lesson that some people take is it's not possible to take yourself out of production. Just because you have some problems with it doesn't mean it's not possible. It is. It just means it's not, if it's not a smooth handoff, that's perfectly normal.
So another, I think, thing you spoke about a little bit is sort of along these lines, growing too fast. I think you said you just cleared payroll, I think by 11 cents. I think that's what it was. Cents. And so that, I want to dive into that, but that's bigger picture, trying a case, you're a trial lawyer. Trying a case is stressful, especially if it's a criminal case. I mean, a defense case. I mean, you're putting your client's burden, their freedom is on the line. That is stress. And you got to prepare and you're in it. It's just, that is a stressful thing. So, and I've been there, many lawyers have been there. But owning a business and running the thing, that is a different kind of stress. It's similar, but it's a little bit different because, this meeting the payroll thing. I mean, you got other people that depend on you and the firm to put food on, to pay their bills. Maybe talk a little bit about sort of the different stress. We read on LinkedIn and hear it's glorified on a scale, like you said, oh, it's all great. But it's stressful and scary as shit sometimes too. So
Yeah. It is. It's really stressful, and that's why I say, like, there's nothing wrong with a paycheck, right? Like, like I said, there's a lot of glorification of entrepreneurship, and not entirely unwarranted. Look, I mean, it's an accomplishment if you're able to do it, and there are real upsides that you can get through entrepreneurship that are more difficult to get through a W-2. But to your point, I don't know of anybody that's started a business, even bought one, that didn't have times where you're staring at the ceiling, wondering, how, like, you're going to make payroll. Like, do I need to fire this person? Do I need to hire this person? Like, it's just, that's part of the business. And it's real stress. And that's why I think, I remember when, I started my firm, and there were a number of people at the U.S. Attorney's Office that kind of came by and like, oh, I've always thought about that, but I'm just too chicken. And I, thinking back, and I'm like, you shouldn't, like, beat up on yourself if that's the choice that you make, right? Like, you're going to get an average job is stressful, right? If you're an attorney, but, like, okay, you get a steady paycheck, maybe an increasing paycheck, and allows you to take vacations, and nothing wrong with that, right? Because if you're making a decision to go into entrepreneurship, there are going to be times when, maybe more prolonged than being in a trial, where you're not around your family, either because you're physically not there, or you're mentally not there, or you're stressed out and taking slings and arrows. And so it is a real, the stress is real. And if you're feeling it as an entrepreneur, like, that's part of the game. I think one of the difficulties is, like, thinking that stress has to be there all the time, right? I have not been in this situation, but I have heard, and I could see how some people get almost addicted to the, oh, we cleared payroll, great. There's a little bit of an endorphin rush from surviving, near financial ruin, and thinking that is the norm, because that's not the norm either, right? Like, you should get to a point where, not that it's easy street, but, I heard one entrepreneur describe it one time, and it's always stuck with me. He's like, and he was not a lawyer. I think he owned bars or something like that. But he's like, it's as if I was walking up a long, narrow step of stairs, flight of stairs, and it's slightly dark. And then all of a sudden I open the door at the top, and, like, it's light, and I'm standing there, and I, like, almost don't even know what to do with myself because I'm used to walking up these stairs in the dark, chasing this thing in the future. So it does get better, and you should be experiencing some of the upside. But yeah, it's not for the faint of heart.
And I'm sure you've felt this. That I think I've talked to so many lawyers that felt that. Some days you wake up and you're like, it'd just be way easier if it was just back in the day when it was just me.
Yeah.
It's like, I'd be making not that much less, but I got fewer headaches. My margins are like 90s because I don't have any overhead. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, right. I mean, that's a choice to make too, right? I mean, like, that's, if you want to, be out there with the one turning the wheel, and some people love what they do and they want to die with their boots on, like, that's great. And I think also recognize that in yourself. If that's what you want to have, you can have a good lifestyle business, nothing wrong with that. But I think the problem I see is people drawing the wrong opposite lesson. They try to hire one person, it doesn't go well, and so they're like, it's not for me, and it's just, it's like dating, right? Like, you go on your first date, you have your first boyfriend, girlfriend, and it doesn't work. Like, well, welcome to life. You got to do that, rinse and repeat, unless you're one of the real lucky ones. And so the fact that it is hard, and that your first two employees, it's difficult, and your margins are slim, doesn't mean you're not doing it right. It just means that is the process, and I think it is possible to get stuck in that kind of payroll gerbil wheel. And I think that again, I remember when I first started, like, I had opposing counsel who had a firm, and I'm like, yeah, I'm leaving to start my own firm. He's like, oh, you want to worry about payroll? I mean, he was not like rah rah. He's like, you dumbass, like, good luck. And so I think there are a lot of resources out there now that are available to help people to understand how to grow, because it's not easy, but it's not rocket science. There's certain building blocks that you have to put in place. And so there's no reason that you should be stuck in a continual kind of hamster wheel of feast or famine either.
So we've been talking a little bit about margins. I think you had a post that I think you said margin before mission.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to have enough profit to be a going concern. And I think this is a bigger, I mean, this was kind of a not for profit that I was talking about, but it's also true. I see it a lot, particularly in my kind of area of the neighborhood with employment and civil rights, where, you're in this to do, and I think all lawyers go into it to do good, but I think some of them are more, some areas are not as predisposed to being like, okay, I got to be, the whole purpose of me doing this is tilting at windmills and fighting the good fight. And so for people that are coming in at that kind of viewpoint, it's kind of a mind shift to be like, okay, you got to look at the back end of this business. Like, this is a money making endeavor, and it has to make money for you to be able to do all this good stuff that you want to do. And the margins have to be big enough that, you can help more people and do more things. If you're squeaking by at 3 to 5% margins, like, that's your own life support as a business. And again, I think for people who are, maybe some criminal defense folks too, you want to get in there, you want to fight the man, you want to fight the good fight and help all the people that you can. I think it's easy to lose sight of the fact that you've got to make a profit to be able to make this work.
So we've talked a lot about growing, scaling, plateaus, and you've gone through several of these, I'll call them growth cycles, at least at this point. And whenever you grow, some people can't manage that change. They can't deal with it. So
Sure.
As the owner or as the leader, any advice or any lessons learned on sort of bringing along the people? We can call it change management, whatever you want to call it, but any ideas or tips there?
Sometimes you can't, right? I mean, I think one of the bigger lessons I had to learn is, the team that got you from A to B is not the team that will usually get you to B to C. Some of them will stay, but some of them will not, and they should not. And so recognizing when somebody has reached their limit, in their role and for what they can provide. And I don't, when I first started that, I was like, that's kind of harsh, like, okay, you're good enough to go from A to B, but you're not good enough to go to B to C. But the truth is that we all have kind of narrow windows of genius. We have genius, but they tend to be narrow windows. And as an entrepreneur, you are essentially firing yourself along the way. Like, okay, I am firing myself from sales. I am firing myself from doing the bookkeeping. Because there's somebody, I have gotten myself from point A to point B, but I'm not the one that's going to get you from point B to point C. And so I think realizing that in your team too, that there are people who, and of course, you should work with people. You should, be talking about them routinely, about their personal, professional, and financial objectives. Does it align with what where the firm is going? And a lot of times, if you're having those conversations with people, they'll tap out, which is fine. Like, hey, I had fun during this part, but now I'm kind of transitioning myself. That's great. And frankly, if I had somebody come to me, if I was hiring for a marketing position or, sales or something like that, if somebody came to me and said, hey, Tom, you know what? My level of genius is getting people from 5 to 10 million. That's what I'm going to do for you. And then I'm out. I'd hire them on the spot, because that shows a real professional maturity and that you understand that a business is going that from 5 to 10 million has different challenges, has different possibilities than a business that's going from 1 to 3 million or from 10 million to 20 million. They're different skill sets. So I think realizing, yes, working with your team, trying to train them up when you can, painting a clear vision of where you're going, because some people may not want to go there. And then understanding sometimes you're going to have to make the difficult decision that this person is not the person that's going to get me to the next stage.
And sort of related to this, and I've talked to others, I'm sure you've seen it, is what works early on, like let's just say the way you compensate people, it's just loosey-goosey. But as you grow and you get more people, it's got to become more structured,
Yes.
more institutionalized, maybe have frameworks around it. And doing that change, I think it's got to be challenging. I'm sort of in the middle of it, trying to figure this out. And you try to build it 5 to 10 years down the road. You're like, okay, what can we build now that we can grow into and we're not having to change it every couple of years? What's been your experience in that regard?
Yeah, and that's one of my real weaknesses for me personally. Like, I just don't think that way. Like, I'm just, like you really need somebody like who's good at HR, like got some serious HR chops. And so I couldn't do it for you. Like if you were to talk to me privately, be like, hey, I'd be like, oh, you need to talk to me to hire somebody or consult with somebody who knows how to do that. I mean, I was the same. Like I, made lots of mistakes early on, both with compensation and with titles and all of that, because not that I didn't care, but I was sort of like, whatever works. If you can like, whatever, like gets us to next week, if you want to call yourself whatever, as long as you're delivering on KPIs, like we'll try to do compensation fairly, but it was a lot of one-offs. And it really was when I hired Brian, who had been with bigger organizations, kind of thought more in that way. And he's like, okay, we need to have reviews, annual reviews, and everybody, that's when raises happen. And this is kind of the bandwidth that they happen in. That's what really did it for me. So I would say if you're not the kind of person to do that, like consult with somebody who does do that to help you come up, because it's oddly difficult, I find, to come up with a system, that has enough flexibility that allows you to grow, but that you're not, just kind of shooting from the hip every time you talk with somebody in terms of title and compensation. I mean, even big businesses struggle with this. So it's not an easy issue it's fixable, but if you're struggling with it, you're about with however many millions of other entrepreneurs out there who are trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Small law firms have a huge problem with over-titling. We've all been there, all guilty, all get discharged. Yes. And you learn that a few times and then you stop doing it. But and people will tell you and you still make that mistake. So you got to do it.
Until you have somebody come back and be like, oh, did you know a director makes da-da-da-da-da? And you're like, no, I didn't.
Exactly. So one more topic, and then we'll sort of wrap this up. You've been very, very generous here. So you've sort of touched on a little bit, but you've gone through all this growth. You've removed yourself from certain roles and functions, but I've also read and experienced and heard that for the organization to grow, the leader has to grow as well. So you've got to expand your mind, expand your skill sets, et cetera, et cetera. So any advice out there for me or other folks that, have these aspirations to grow, how do you keep pushing yourself to grow along with the organization? Or maybe that has to come first. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, usually personal growth comes first and then professional growth follows after. I think getting out from behind your desk and joining other groups of folks, there are a ton of masterminds and coaching programs, and going someplace that's going to put you in a zone of discomfort, is the way that you grow. Classic therapy can help too, right? Like, I think you've just always got to be, like you said, working on yourself. But a lot of it I got from coaching groups. And frankly, I'm kind of, circling. I took a kind of a breather from it because I'd done so much of it that I, kind of took for a year off. But now I'm thinking about trying to get back into the game and how do I get into a room with people that are going to push me? Because I think it's hard. It's almost impossible to do by yourself, right? You got to be with people who are aligned with, their goals and what they're trying to do. And frankly, you should be a little bit uncomfortable, because if you're not, you're probably not growing. But I think that's absolutely right. You've got to, the more you expand as your own vessel, the more your business is going to expand with you.
And I'm with you. I like getting in those rooms. My goal is to be on the very low end of the people in that room, not the high end. When you're on the high end, it's time to go to a different room.
Right. Exactly right.
So, well, Tom, it's been great. Is there anything else we hadn't covered that's on your mind? Happy to jump in.
No, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you having me back on the show. Great podcast.
Yeah, man, that's been great. So again, if anybody wants to find you, what's the best way?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me at my law firm's website, spigglelaw.com. And yeah, it's probably the two best places to find me.
And yes, people on LinkedIn, go follow Tom. He posts some really good stuff. So keep posting that. Keep talking to me, Tom. Right. Keep doing it.
Okay, I will, Jonathan. I will. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.